Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is episode 3 of Linux Zero to Hero series, and in this episode we will cover three sections: user management, file management, and VI shortcuts. So typically we will learn section 3, 4 and 5 of our Linux course. Without wasting any time, let's start with user management. So what is user management in Linux and why is it needed? Before we learn this, let's go a step back and discuss about our personal laptops. Many of you might be using Mac OS or Windows laptops. When you buy them for the first time, you set up an admin user and password for the admin user. It's very unlikely that you go back and create more users on your personal laptop, although your laptop supports it. But most of the times you don't create any additional users because it's your personal machine and you are the one accountable for any action on the machine. Let's say a file is created, a file is deleted, or a software is installed. You know that you have done it. So you don't bother creating another user called non-admin. And when you want to perform software installations, use the admin user. When you want to just browse, surf through the internet, use the non-admin users. I don't think many people would do that because the accountability on your personal laptop is pretty clear. Whereas when you talk about a Linux server, in the previous lecture, I explained that 90% of production workloads run on a Linux server. So it's most likely when you join a company, you will be working on a Linux server. Whether you are a developer, DevOps engineer, QA engineer, you would need access to the Linux server because end of the day, your applications are running on the Linux server. You might want to look at some files, you want to change the configuration of your application, or you might want to read the logs of the application. So imagine there is no user management on Linux and your company has 100 developers, developer A, B, C, D, etc. And all of them are shared with the root user and password of the root user. In the last lecture, we learned what is root user. It's a super user with all the permissions on the machine. So if all of these developers are granted with root user and password of the root user, and unfortunately, a developer deletes file from the Linux server. Imagine this developer deleted sbin folder from the Linux server, which is system binary folder, and it has all the important binaries. So your Linux server is almost corrupt. If you know who has done this, in future, you might restrict access to this user from other Linux servers, or you might flag this user as spam, right? You can take actions on the user. However, all of them are granted with the root user. So there is no way you know who has done it. So this is called as lack of accountability. And your Linux server is not at all safe when there is no user management. So to solve this problem, what administrators do as part of user management, they would create users and groups. So for every developer in the organization, every QE engineer in the organization, every DevOps in the organization, anyone who needs access to the server, whether it is 100, 1000 or any number, individual users are created to those engineers. For example, there is a engineer with name Abhishek.Veeramalla. So as Linux administrator, you would come up with a naming convention, maybe the first name of the user and the surname of the user. And as a Linux administrator, you would create a user with name A. Veeramalla. This is just to ensure if you just keep the username as Abhishek, tomorrow there might be another Abhishek in the organization. So to avoid that, you would come up with a nomenclature and you would create users name which are unique. And for each user, you would grant permissions depending upon what user do in the organization. If user is a DevOps engineer, probably you would grant admin access, that is the highest privilege. If the user is developer, maybe you would restrict access to folders like sbin. If the user is a manager, probably you would just grant read access to all the files on the server. We will learn that in detail. We have a section called file permissions where I'll explain you in detail how to grant permissions to the user. In this section, we will focus on how to create the users, how to set up passwords for the user, how to log in as an individual user instead of root user. And similarly, we will learn about groups as well. So let's go ahead and see how to create users first. So for creation of users and groups, we will continue with our local Linux environment. Right? In the previous lecture, I explained you how to create a local Linux environment. Either use WSL if you're on Windows, or go for a Docker environment if you're on Mac. Those commands are available here. If you go to section 1, you have a file called setup.md where I explain WSL, the Docker container environment. So I will use the Docker container environment for teaching you user management and group management as well. How to log into that container environment which we already created? If you haven't created, run this command. If you created, just search for Docker PS and look for the container with name Ubuntu container. Go to this ID and run docker exec-it followed by bin bash. Abhishek, I don't want to use any of this. No problem. You can just go to your favorite cloud provider and create an instance. If you don't know how to create instance, we have videos on our channel. Just go to DevOps Zero to Hero series or search for Abhishek.Veeramalla followed by virtual machine and you will get all the steps. Never mind. So once you run this command, you are inside the Docker Linux container environment. Good. So how to create a user? Let's start with that. So to create a user in Linux, you will use this command called user add followed by name of the user. So let's use the same nomenclature, Veeramalla. And this will create a user called Veeramalla on my Linux machine. Abhishek, how can I check it? How can I check that a user is created successfully? So for that, there is a file in Linux which is /etc/pawswd. So etc is a system configuration folder. It's just like settings. Within that, there is a file called pawswd. If you open this, so you will find a user called Veeramalla is created. So if there is an entry in this particular file, that means a user is created with that particular user. If in your case Vim does not exist, just run apt install Vim. Or you can also use cat to directly print the contents of the file on your terminal. So cat/etc/pawswd. Cool. So Veeramalla is created. However, a user without password is of no use. So how to create password for the user? For that, there is a command called pawswd followed by name of your user. So you need to set up the password. That is, administrator sets up the password and shares this information securely. In companies, there are a lot of internal tools to share such user credentials. So once the Linux administrator creates this username and password through that internal security tools, Administrator will send that to the developer, DevOps engineer, QE, whoever it is. So I'll set up a password. That's all. Now my user is created. Abhishek, how can I check the password is created? So you showed how the user is created. Now I want to see if the password is created or not. You can definitely check that. There is a file. So if I just do cat to print output of the file to the terminal, followed by slash etc, followed by shaddow, that is shadow. So for a Viramalla user, this is the encrypted password. Abhishek, can I decrypt this password? So it is a very important interview question as well. So if you have access to a Linux server, can you decrypt passwords of users on the Linux machine? Or this is asked in other ways as well. So as an administrator, you shared username and password to a developer. After 1 month, developer forgot the password. So can you restore the old password of the developer? In both of the cases, answer is no. Although you have encrypted password here, this is very highly encrypted. So it is, I mean, as part of this encryption, SHA-256, I believe. So there is a hashing done, and this is a one-way encryption. So decryption is not possible. So even though you have access to a Linux server, you can go to this file, look at the encrypted password, but you cannot decrypt it. In a nutshell, if somebody forgets the password, there is no way to restore the old password. There are some tools on the internet, which promises to do it. However, they are not at all safe. They can decrypt basic passwords, but they are not allowed to use in the organization. Okay. So we learned about user add to add a user. We learned about PASSWD to create password for the user. Then we learned about cat/etc PASSWD file, which has all the user information. Then we learned about SHADOW shadow file, which has encrypted password. Now, okay, we have learned all of these things. Imagine I have to delete a user. Right? I created a user, but after a while, user left the organization or is leaving the organization. How can I delete user for the organization? User from the organization? Very simple. So all that you need is user del, that is user delete, followed by name of the user. That's it. User is deleted. Now if I just search for cat etc PASSWD, you will not find user called A Viramalla. It's as simple as that. If a user is leaving the organization, just do that. Okay. Now, Abhishek, you have created a user with user add, but details of the user are not saved, right? Sometimes you want to take the details of the user. For example, what is the full name of the user, to which group this user belongs to, and you also want to create a home directory for the user. When I did user add A Viramalla, right? Although user is created, but if I just look at ls/home, you will see there is no folder for A Viramalla. There is folder for Ubuntu. There is folder for other users that I have created in the past. But for A Viramalla, there is no home directory. Why? So user add is a very simple command to create user. It does not create home directory for the user, or it does not save user details. To do that, there is similar command. Instead of user add, you should do add user. So add user followed by A Viramalla. Okay, because it already exists, first I will do user del A Viramalla, and then I will run add user A Viramalla. So this time Okay, it started doing some things. Then I will provide password. Great. Now it is asking what is the full name of the user. I will say Abhishek.Veeramalla. Then it says what is the room number. Okay, I can skip this. Work phone number, home phone number, other details. I will say all the information is correct. And then it said a user is created and also home directory is created for the user. Let's verify. ls/home. Perfect. A Viramala now has a home directory as well. Okay. Now all this is fine. Abhishek, you said user management is important for accountability and keeping Linux environment secure. Can you prove this? Sure. So what we will do, we are in the root user. Let's switch to a Viramala user and try to delete sbin. Okay. So let me try to do it. I am ready to corrupt my Linux environment. If what I said is wrong, my Linux environment will be completely corrupt. If user management in Linux environment doesn't work, I am going to mess up my Linux environment. So to switch to that user, I'm in root right now. To switch there is a command called su hyphen a Viramalla. Okay. So you can see from root, I went to a Viramalla @Ubuntu dev. Previously it was root @Ubuntu dev. Now it is a Viramalla. I can also check that using another command called who am I. Don't get confused with the commands. Abhishek, you are using so many commands. It's okay. With practice, you will also learn it. And I'm intentionally trying to put these commands in place in order so that you will never forget them. I'm randomly not using switch user. I'm randomly not using who am I. This is a very simple command. I could have taught this on day one as well. But the best place for teaching this command is right now. That's why I explained it at this point. Okay, going back. Now I'm going to risk it rm-rf, that is to delete a folder /sbin. You can see it says permissions are denied. That is the power of user management in Linux. When you create users, by default, they will not have permissions like the root user. Abhishek, how can I grant permissions to a Viramalla? Don't worry, you will learn that as part of file permissions, the next section. For today's class, let's not jump and dive to that point. Okay. If I go back and run the same command as root user, all that folder will be deleted. If somebody wants to risk it, they can. Okay, perfect. Now we learned a lot of things. So I want to stress on two things, two important interview questions. One, what is the difference between user add and add user? Both of these commands does the same thing. However, add user creates home directory for a Viramalla. It also takes a lot of user information. Whereas user add is a quick way of creating the users where it does not prompt for details. It does not ask user full name, or it does not even create the home directory. Abhishek, then what is the use of user add? Because add user looks to be more powerful. Very simple. User add is very useful when you are writing scripts. So when you are writing scripts, you don't want the tool or the command to prompt inputs or to ask inputs from you, because this becomes interactive way, right? Whereas when you are writing a shell script or Python script, you want a command that just creates a user and goes to the next instruction of the shell script. So only in such cases you will go with user add. When you write shell scripts to create user, to create automation through the user, you will realize importance of user add. Okay. Then we learned another important interview question. Can you restore the password of a Linux user? The answer is no. If a Linux user forgets the password, and if the password is not stored either in a file or in LDAP or maybe in SSO of the organization, there is no way to restore the password. Although you can get encrypted password from /etc/shadow file, right? These are important interview questions. I would highly recommend at this point of user management, like once you complete watching today's video, just go back and thoroughly read the README file. Because in README file, I have few commands more which I have not explained during the lecture. Because it's quite obvious, I might have missed few things. If you go through this document, you will learn those important commands as well. For example, when you create password for the user, let's say as an organization, you have a compliance that every 90 days password has to be changed. Okay. So that your passwords are not leaked or somebody is writing passwords on their workstation or writing on a whiteboard. After 90 days, even if the person forgets to swipe it or somebody knows the password, it will be changed. So for that, you can use this command. Once you create password for the user, CHH minus M90 followed by name of the user, and password will be changed every 90 days or it will ask you to change. Then log a user account. For some reason, as an administrator, you found one of the user to be hacky or one of the user is performing, uh, you know, some spam activities on the Linux server. So what you can do, you can use this command to basically log the user account. And once you talk to the user and once you feel confident about the user, you can just unlock the user account using this command, right? So log the user and unlock the user. Great. We learned about deleting of users. Now let's go to groups. So this was pretty much about users. Now, as part of user management, let's learn about groups. Abhishek, I understood the significance of users. So we are creating users, we are creating passwords to the users, we are granting permissions to the users to certain files. Why do we need groups? Very simple. So the point is that if you have 5 users in the organization, you can manage it through the users. Imagine you have 10 users, even then it's fine. But let's say you have 500 users on the Linux server, out of which 250 are developers, 200 are QA engineers, 30 are DevOps engineers, and 10 are from the management. Just imagine this. And one fine day, you are a Linux administrator and you are asked to change a particular file permissions for 250 developers. So right now, 250 developers have access to /sbin folder and you are asked to remove their access from sbin folder. Imagine going to each and every user, going to file and trying to update permissions of 250 developers is a very tedious activity. Now, what if the users are 1500 instead of 500? It's going to be even more tedious activity. So what you do instead is you basically create the groups. So you will create groups called dev, QE, DevOps, followed by management. And what you will simply do as a one-time activity, you will just put all 250 developers inside the dev group. Now, if you get such request, all the developers should be revoked access to /sbin folder. Instead of doing that at user level, you will just go to the group and you will modify the permissions of the group. When you do this, directly or indirectly, all the developers within the group will be modified the access. That's it. So groups are basically useful for the same reason. At user level, as the number of users grow, managing permissions is going to be difficult. changing permissions, deleting a particular users in the group is going to be very difficult. But if you create groups, you can do that directly at the group level. It's one-time activity to put users in the group. Abhishek, can you show this to me? Why not? Let's go back to our Linux environment. First, let's learn how to create a group. Group add, just like user add, group add followed by, I'll call this group as DevOps. Abhishek, is the group created? Let's check cat slash etc slash group. So you will find a new group called as DevOps, right? So when I do cat slash etc slash group, it creates a new group called as root. Abhishek, why there are other groups? I have created a lot of other groups previously. So you have some groups and there are some default groups as well. There are some special groups also. I will talk about it. But for now, this is a group that I have created. So it says DevOps is a group and right now there is no user in the group. Let me try to add one. Okay. So how to add a user to the group? For that, there is a command called usermod -a small a capital G name of the group followed by user, which is Veeramalla. That's it. Now, if I go back to the file and print its contents, you will see DevOps X 1010, which is the group ID, followed by Veeramalla. So that means Veeramalla is a user which is part of DevOps group, right? Similarly, I can add 100 users, I can add 1000 users as part of a single group. When I change permissions of this particular group, the permissions of all the users will be changed. Perfect. So we learned how to create group using group add. Then we learned about cat slash etc slash group file to list out the groups. And then we learned how to add user to a group using usermod -small a capital G, followed by name of the group and username. So this is about user management and group management. But how does this entire thing work in real time? For example, when I join a company, right, I will not be asked to log into a Linux container environment. I will be asked to log into a real Linux server, right? Or on cloud platforms like AWS or Azure, companies have something called virtual machine, right? Which is basically a machine on the physical Linux server. And I should be logged in to the virtual machine. Abhishek, how can I do it? Very simple. Whatever concept that you learned till now are perfectly fine. Only thing that you need to know additionally, so when you join a company, obviously they have machines like this. For example, this is a Linux virtual environment. So your manager or your DevOps engineer, whoever responsible for it, server admin, they will provide you this IP address and they will provide you a username and the password, right? Then you need to log into this Linux server and typically work on it. Just like how you are working on your Docker container Linux environment. So what your administrator will do, so they have this option called connect. So they will connect here. This does not ask for password or anything. So just like how we were creating on the Linux root environment or Docker environment, they will create a user called user add Veeramalla. Permission denied. So because I am in the Ubuntu user, let me switch to root user. To switch to root user from Ubuntu, you will use the command sudo su hyphen. I'll tell you what is sudo. For now, ignore it. Once you are here, user add Veeramalla, PAWSWD Veeramalla. Okay, let me create one dummy password. Now, what the Linux administrator will do? So Linux administrator or sysadmin will send you the IP address, will send you username, and will send you password. So they will send this in an encrypted way. Okay, through a internal tool, you will get an email probably saying that, hey, this is the IP address, this is the username, click on this to get password. And once you copy it, the password will vanish, something like that. Now to connect to this Linux environment, what you need is something called as SSH client. So we will learn a new topic at this point. And this topic is SSH. Very, very simple topic in Linux. So every Linux environment. So whenever you create a Linux server, out of the box on the Linux server, there is a process that is running, which is SSHD. Okay. So on the Linux server, there is a process that is running, which is called as SSHD. And this process will allow you to log into the Linux server. How? On your personal laptop or on your office laptop, because you are working for a company, you have an office laptop environment. On this, you install something called as SSH client. So when you install SSH client on your office machine, this SSH client comes with a package called SSH. So you might be thinking it is very complicated. No, it is just a one single step and one single command. Once you learn it, you will feel that, oh, it's super simple. But it's worth understanding the concept. That's why I'm explaining it. So by default, a Linux server has a process running called SSHD. On your personal laptop, you will install SSH client, which will install SSH on your machine. And you will take this SSH client, run a single command with which you will connect to the Linux server. Abhishek, what are these SSH clients? Popular one, if you're on Windows, is Git Bash, or you can use WSL as well, but Git Bash is very powerful. If you're on Mac, you can use Terminal of Mac. I think on Mac, you will get it out of the box. If you don't get it, just go to internet and search for iTerm2. If you're on Windows, search for Git Bash and just download it. Then you go to search bar, either on Mac or Windows, and just search for these utilities. You will find a terminal like this. That's it. Now I will press Ctrl D to come out of that Docker container or Docker Linux environment. And to log into this Linux machine, as I told you, on the SSH client, this is my SSH client, I will run the command SSH, followed by the user that was given to me, Veeramalla, at the rate the IP address of the instance. Okay, enter. It asks you for the password. Just provide the password that is shared by the administrator. And now you are inside the Linux environment. So you can check that if you just do who am I, it will say you are Veeramalla. And if you just run the command uname -a, it will provide that this is the Linux instance, right? And this Linux instance is the same one, 172.31.87.187. 172.31.87.187. So it is so simple to connect to any Linux server once you have the user credentials. Control D to come out of it, and just to show you the command one more time. SSH Veeramalla @ IP address. Abhishek, but when I tried to do it on one of the virtual machines or one of the cloud providers, password was disabled or password access was disabled. Yeah, you are right. So what these cloud providers do out of the box, because some companies don't manage the passwords well. So passwords are something that gets leaked because people write it on the desk, people write it on the wall, people write it on a paper, or just store that somewhere and they get leaked. So to avoid such things, what cloud providers do, right? So if you go to this instance, there is a file on the cloud provider. So the location of the file is this. Remember the location of the file or just copy it. So this is the location of the file, etc ssh dconfig.d followed by a configuration file. Within this file, so they will set up password authentication as no, right? So they will just do password authentication as no on this file. So I'll just try to cat the file to show you. See, password authentication is set as yes. By default, this password authentication will be set to no. Just for the demo purpose, I already logged into the instance before and I changed password authentication as yes. That's why we were able to log in with the password. But these cloud providers by default disable it. If you're working in your company, your administrator can enable it, disable it. It totally depends upon your organizational compliance standard, right? Abhishek, how did you do it? Just I went to this file, I changed password authentication from yes to no, and I ran this command called systemctl restart ssh. If you're on Ubuntu user, you need sudo. If you're on root, you don't need it. Just run systemctl restart ssh process. That's it. Password authentication will be enabled. Abhishek, if password authentication is disabled, how can I log in? If password authentication is disabled, then you have something called as PEM file. Okay, I will cover about PEM file in the future classes. Right now we are learning about user management, so it is not required. Cool. So this was about section 3. At this point, if you want to take a break, you can take 2 minutes or 5 minutes break and come back to next topics, which are super simple. Unlike your user management, next topics are going to be very light and we will complete them in the next 15 minutes, right? So let's go ahead. I don't need a break. I will do it. So I'll go back to the Linux container environment. Now what we are going to learn? We are going to learn about file management. Most simple activity on your Linux environment. First thing, how to list the files. Just go to the root user, type ls. These are all the files and folders on this particular location. So that the command to list files and folders is ls. You learned one command. Then how to go to one of these directories, right? We learned how to list the folders and files. Now I want to go to one of these folders. For that, the command is change directory, which is cd. cd, that is change directory, tmp. Now I'm inside the tmp directory. Again, I can do ls to see if there are any files. There is a folder called abhi. How do I know this is folder? Looking at the color. Okay. So there is a folder called abhi. I can just go into it, cb abhi. So I went into this folder. Again, if I do ls, I can see if there are any files. There are no files. Cool. Abhishek, how can I come back? Okay, I went into abhi folder. I went into tmp folder. To come back, again use the cd command, but just write 2 dots. Now you are in the tmp folder. Now write 2 dots again. You are at the root of the file system, right? We learned about this particular thing. What is path? Slash means root of the file system. Okay, we learned about ls, we learned about cd. Now Abhishek, imagine I don't have this and I want to see in which directory I'm in. Right? I went into tmp folder, but I'm slightly confused which folder I'm in. You can use a command called pwd, which is present working directory. It will tell you which directory are you in. Okay, let me stay in CMD or the temporary directory itself, and let's learn how to create a new folder in it. To create a new folder in Linux, we call it as directory. The command is mk, that is make dir directory. Let me create directory called Veeramalla. And if I do ls, I will find a directory called Veeramalla. As simple as it. So we learned how to list files, how to check the working directory, how to create, how to go back. Now, Abhishek, I want to delete this directory. I accidentally created it. How to delete it? rmdir followed by name of the directory. That's it. If I do ls now, you will not find the directory. Abhishek, instead of directory, I want to delete file. So to delete file, first let's learn how to create a file. There is one command called touch. So touch abhi file will actually create a file. You can look at the color. This color is for folder and this color is for file. It depends on your terminal. Some terminals don't support it. My terminal supports, so it's easy for me. Otherwise, if I do ls-ltr, if you see D at the starting, that means it's a directory. If you don't see D, that means it's a file. A simple indicator. Abhishek, I want to delete this. For removing a directory, we used rmdir, but for removing a file, we can just use rm followed by abhi file. Ls, you will not find abhi file. Okay. There is another way of deleting a directory as well. Instead of rmdir, I can just use rm-f abhi. Because it's a directory, my bad, rm-rf abhi. So this will delete the directory called abhi as well. Okay, so we learned good amount of commands. Finally, let's learn few things related to the files. One thing, how to copy the files. Abhishek, I have one file here. Let's create one, touch abhi. In Windows, if I have to create a copy of this file, I will just right click and I will say create a copy of it. In Linux, you can use a command called cp. What is the file and what is the new name of the file that you want to copy? So it will create another file called Veeramalla, which has the same contents of the file abhi. I know I haven't covered how to write contents into the file because that's my next section. For now, I'm dealing with empty files itself. So I have an empty file called abhi and I created a duplicate or a copy of that empty file with name Veeramalla. Okay, so you know how to delete these files. Just do rm and the file is deleted. But instead of creating a duplicate, what I want to do is just rename this file, right? Instead of abhi, I want to rename this file to Veeramalla. So first let me remove this rm Veeramalla. If I do ls, that is gone. Now I will just rename the file abhi to Veeramalla instead of creating a copy. For that, the command is mv abhi to Veeramalla. If I do ls, instead of abhi, you will find a file called Veeramalla. Now these are the important commands when it comes to file management. Where can you revise these topics? Just go to the GitHub repository. Link is in the description. And go to readme.md. Here you will find all the commands that I just explained. Files and folder management. Now, Abhishek, I want to actually write contents to the file and I want to print the files. I want to basically view the content of the file. But for that, let's actually learn how to write into a file. Although this is part of section 4, I will just come back to it. First, we will go to section file and learn how to write to a file. We are creating files, right? I have created a file called touch abhi, ls abhi, but there is literally nothing in the file. If you look at the file size, it's 0 bytes, right? There is literally nothing in the file. Now, I want to write content to the file. How do I write? In Windows, it's very simple, right? You just open Notepad, you go to the file, and you just start writing into the file. But in Linux, it's little complicated. You need to use a utility called VI or VIM. I would recommend VIM over VI. Commands will work absolutely same. You usually call it as VI editor only. VIM is a wrapper on top of VI. So how do you install this? Just run apt install VIM. If you are not root, sudo apt install VIM. Okay. Once you have this, you created file using touch. Abhi is the file. Vim abhi. Okay. Now you entered into the file. Okay. You did one step that you enter to the file. Now, how do you write it? By default, this particular file, when you open, has three different modes. Normal mode, insert, that is write mode, or command mode. So in normal mode, you cannot write content to the file, right? To write content to the file, you should go to the insert mode. So to go to the insert mode, once you open the file using VIM, just type I as an alphabet. So type I, you will see here hyphen hyphen insert. That means you are in the insert mode. Now you can start writing anything. For example, I will write learning Linux with Abhishek.Veeramalla. I pressed enter. I'll write one more line. Linux is super simple. We learned 4 sections till now and learning section 5 at this point. Okay. Now I wrote a lot of contents into the file, but in the insert mode, you cannot save the file, right? As I told you, yeah, I know it's complicated when it comes to Linux. You cannot directly write into the file. You cannot directly save into the file. You need to know few commands. Okay. So insert mode, you are already in the insert mode. You wrote some contents into the file. To save the file, you need to go to the command mode. So command is an instruction. You are telling Linux to save the file, which is a command. For that, just press escape. Okay. Here you need to press escape. Press colon WQ. WQ is to save, W is to save, and Q is to quit the file. Okay. So you are doing WQ and you can do this exclamatory mark and press enter. Now the content is saved to the file. You can print contents of the file cat abhi. You will see all of these things. And if you look at the size of the file, it is not 0 bits, right? So it is 130 because you added content to the file. I'll repeat again. In Linux, to open the file, we will use something called as VIM or VI editor. Provide the name of the file, and by default, you are in the normal mode where you cannot write into the file. To write to the file, press I. You will see hyphen hyphen insert at the bottom. And once you see that, you can actually start writing the contents into the file, any number of lines. And to save the file, you will press escape. And once you press escape, you are in the command mode. Now you can ask to save the file, or you can just say quit the file without saving. If you press colon WQ followed by exclamatory, it will save the file. However, I wrote something I don't want to save. I can just say Q exclamatory and it will quit the file. WQ is to save and quit the file. Q is to just quit the file. Now if I do cat abhi, you will see the extra 2 lines that I wrote are not visible because they are not saved. So 3 modes. Normal mode is only for navigation. So if you open the file in normal mode, you can just go up, you can go down, you can just scroll to the left side, scroll to the right side, because there may be 1,000 lines in the file. Right now there are only 3-4 lines. So scrolling up and down is easy. But when there are 1,000 lines, it will be in different pages. So these up arrows, down arrows are usually used to read the contents of the file. The second mode is insert mode. When you press escape, right? Sorry, when you press I, you will go to the insert mode. And the third one is the command mode. To get into the command mode, you should just basically press escape and followed by colon, right? And then you provide instructions like WQ or Q to quit the file. So this is about file shortcuts, where in each of the mode, you have a lot of shortcuts. For example, I want to navigate through the file. Abhishek, this file is very simple one. Can you create a complex file and then let's learn about file navigation? Why not? So let's open a file. Instead of touch, you can directly open file without creating as well. I will just do demo file dot txt, and within this, let's write some 1,000 lines just for learning file management, right? Or file navigation. So to generate that, I will use my friend ChatGPT and ask it, generate 1,000 lines within a text file related to India. Okay, so it is going to create some 1,000 lines in the text file. So here are 1,000 lines. Okay, it created a text file to download. I'll just open it. And I will go back to my terminal, paste it using Control V or Command V. Now it is pasting all the 1,000 lines. You know how to save it. Escape, colon, not semicolon, colon, WQ, exclamatory. Now if I do cat demo file, you will see all the 1,000 lines. Scroll up, scroll down, you will see the 1,000 lines. In the file also, you can navigate demo file, and using cursor up, you can go to the top of the file. Using cursor down, you can start scrolling bottom. However, Abhishek, we are in line number 1,000. I want to go to line number 1, right? I cannot keep scrolling up. Is there something that I can do? Definitely. First, you need to come to the normal mode, right? To come to the normal mode, you have 3 different modes, right? To come to the normal mode, first press escape. You are in the normal mode, and then press 0, colon 0, and you are at the first line. So what did I do? Escape, colon 0. So 0 is a command that I've provided where it went to the first line of the file. Abhishek, I want to go to line number 500. Very simple. Escape, colon 500. So it will go to the line number 500. Similarly, 200, 300, you can go to any line. Now, instead of this colon, what you can also do is you can just press escape, shift G. It will take you to the last line. Escape, shift O. It will basically create a new line. Or escape U. It will remove the line. Or just press escape. Sorry, I already explained that. Escape colon 0. You will go to the first line. Abhishek, it's slightly confusing, I know, because I'm pressing my keyboard, you cannot see my keyboard. What you can do is you can actually go through all the instructions here. So I've provided all the instructions for insert mode, basic navigation, editing the text, search and replace. So you can go through the commands here, because I can literally not show you my keyboard. So it will be little difficult if I'm pressing escape, if I'm pressing colon, if I'm pressing a particular alphabet, you can't see that. So that's why I created this file with all the commands for you. Just spend some 30 minutes or 1 hour on it and you will definitely enjoy it. Okay, so we learned about it. Now that we have a file with 1,000 lines also, let's learn about how to read the files. Abhishek, I know how to read a file. You already explained that if I just do cat followed by name of the file, it prints all the 1,000 lines. No, I don't need all the 1,000 lines. Let's say you have a task where you just want to open the file without printing the contents of the file on your terminal. So for that, what you can do is type less followed by name of the file. So the name of the file is demo file. Okay, less command does not exist. Apt install less. So this is a command where instead of printing on the terminal, it will actually create a interactive page for you where you can scroll up and scroll down. Less demo file.txt. So you can see I'm scrolling up and scrolling down. It's similar to Vim, but here you cannot run any instructions. So Vim is basically for you to run the instructions. Press Q and you will come out of the file. Abhishek, how about printing last 20 lines of the file? You can just do tail -20 demo file.txt. So it just printed from 980 to 1000. Abhishek, how about printing first 100 files of the txt or first 10 lines of the file? Head -10 demo file.txt. So this is how you can create, use the commands head and tail. Tail is to print from bottom, head is to print from top. The command itself explains, right? Head and tail. Cool. And you also have, I mean, these are just fun commands. You actually don't have a lot of, use to it. Just like cat, you have something called tag demo file.txt, where it will print things in the reverse order. However, it's not of much use. So you can ignore tag. We learned about less. More is also similar to less. Head, I explained. Tail, I explained. Nano is an editor like Vim or VI. And if you want to write contents to the file without using Vim, you can use command like echo, where I will say echo hello followed by name of our file, demo file.txt. Now this will create 1001 line. That is, after 1000 lines, it will add a new line where in our demo.txt, if I do tail -10 demo file.txt, you will find hello, right? So this is, oh, my bad. Okay, so I just messed it up. Instead of one greater than symbol, I should have used two greater than symbols. Yeah, so I should have used this one instead of this. So it's a simple mistake. Anyways, so when you use one greater than symbol, it will delete all the content of the file and just add the line that you used in echo. Whereas if you use two greater than symbols, it will just append to the existing file. For example, my demo.txt now has a line called hello. I can do echo world greater than demo file.txt. What this will do, if I do cat, now it will add a new line called world. Whereas if I use a single line, single greater than symbol, hello world greater than demo file.txt, you can see it will remove all the lines and just add what you print in the echo. Echo is basically a print statement in shell. So we are printing it and then we are forwarding that to the demo file.txt. So this is about section 3, section 4, and section 5. Yeah, it might be a lengthy session, but we have covered a lot of interesting things. I hope you found it well. And I would highly recommend to go back to the documentation. I spent a lot of time adding this documentation. So please go through it. Thank you so much for watching today's video, section 3, section 4, and section 5. See you all in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.